What's going on, guys? Josh from SoccerReviewsForYou.com bringing you the first episode in my new shooting tutorial series. If you guys end up enjoying the video and want to see more from this particular series, be sure to support the video with a like. That lets me know that you want to see more. Now, unlike a lot of tutorial videos that you might see online where learn how to shoot the ball in 3 easy steps, they're very, very simplified, and there's nothing wrong with making simple instructions to learn something. There are basic aspects of the movement or of the skill talked about in these types of tutorials, but what makes the difference between an okay shot and a great shot are the small details and the little intricacies that are often glossed over in these tutorial videos that I want to focus on in this particular series. What I want to focus on in today's video is the very last step that you take up to the ball during a strike. So the final step that you take to plant your foot and ultimately strike through the ball. This is the one aspect of striking the ball in general that I think very often gets glossed over. People consider the approach, the run-up, where you plant your foot, how you strike the ball, the angle of your foot, the part of the ball that you make contact with, the follow through. There's a lot to consider. We're going to talk about all of these in detail in future tutorial videos. But what I want to focus on today and really break down is that final step, because if this goes wrong, everything else goes wrong. This is the most important element when it comes to striking the ball, in my opinion, not only when it comes to power, but also more importantly, especially when it comes to consistency. In a game where you're only going to get a few chances per game, in general, of course, everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. You want to be as consistent as possible. So whether you're learning or whether you're even a more experienced player and you're trying to perfect your technique, you're trying to become more consistent, I think some of the stuff that I'm going to point out in today's video, you're going to find extremely helpful, and it'll open your eyes a little bit in terms of what you weren't considering before when it comes to striking the ball. So I'm going to break down what you should focus on in the last step of your strike, and then I'm going to show you some drills that you can do yourself to try and improve this aspect of your game. Gauge the proper distance of your last step. Now, this is something that's going to be consistent no matter what type of strike you're performing, whether it's a free kick, whether it's a rolling ball, whether the ball's rolling across your body, whether you're striking with the laces, the inside of your foot, the outside of your foot. The distance that you take for that final step to plant your foot and strike the ball is going to be the same in pretty much every single one of these situations. So this is something that you really have to think about and try to get as consistent as possible when you strike the ball. So obviously, everyone's going to be a little bit different in this type of situation. Striking the ball is not a robotic movement. There's a lot going on. It should be kind of fluid. It should look kind of natural. But with that said, everyone's going to have their own style of shooting the ball. Everyone's going to look a little bit different, even though we're all performing the same technique. So again, that final step, the length of it, that's going to vary from person to person. For me personally, my final step tends to be a little bit longer. That's where I feel most comfortable. That's where I feel most consistent. So again, you have to consider those two things, what feels comfortable and what ends up working for you and being the most consistent. That's the distance that you want to try and practice, and that's the distance that you want to try to repeat every single time that you run up to the ball. Consistent stride length. So like I talked about that final step having to be consistent, generally that's easier to do if the strides before it match that length. From there, it's just a matter of gauging the distance and of course working out the timing if the ball is moving. So as a bad example, I'll show you a little clip on screen where I do a run up to the ball with short, choppy, kind of inconsistent strides, and the end result is going to be a strike that's not as powerful as it could be, not as accurate as it could be, and if I did that over and over again, the consistency is going to be all over the place. So what I like to do as kind of a general rule of thumb, especially if you're still learning, obviously this is something that you're going to work out as you get better at it, is when you approach the ball, whether it be for a free kick or on a rolling ball, try to make your strides as consistent as possible, meaning that they're all similar in length. You don't want to be varying your speed. You don't want to be varying your stride length. It should be a very fluent, natural, consistent motion up until the plant foot and striking through the ball. Figure out where to plant your foot. We're talking a lot about the length of that last step and getting it as consistent as possible, but the final part of that last step is where your foot lands. And if it's a landing in a different spot every single time, you're still going to be inconsistent when it comes to striking the ball. So traditionally, when it comes to where you should plant your foot, it's generally directly next to the ball, but this is something that you really have to gauge for yourself. That's why I said figure it out, because everyone's going to be a little bit different. You have to consider that, yes, there's a proper way of doing it technically, but everyone's a different shape, everyone's a different size, everyone's got different size feet, everyone's approaching at different speeds, different angles, whatever it may be. So what works for you might not necessarily work the same way for somebody else. So it really is a matter of figuring out where to plant your foot, what works best for you, what feels most consistent for you, and that's how you should go about practicing from there forward. But you really want to make sure that, again, that final step is consistent, but so is where your foot lands. For me personally, I tend to be a little bit further forward on my plant foot in proportion to where the ball is than a lot of people. But again, that's what works for me. That's what tends to be the most consistent. That's where I feel like I'm able to generate the most amount of power, the best accuracy. It's something that you kind of have to work out for yourself and then obviously perfect with lots and lots of practice. The first drill that you can do to practice this is all about focusing on your approach, which I would describe as phase 1 of striking the ball, with phase 2 being the actual ball contact. And we're removing phase 2 from this particular drill. You're not actually going to make contact with the ball. So what you want to do is put the ball down like it's a free kick situation, do your normal approach, back up, count your strides, whatever you do. I personally don't count strides, I just have a general distance of what feels comfortable. But again, everyone has their own little routine when it comes to that kind of thing. Then from there, you want to do your standard approach, but the focus is on the approach, the final step, and where your foot lands. From there, stop completely. Do not hit the ball, but be aware of how that approach went. Be aware of the length of that final step. Be aware of where your foot landed, because you want that to be as consistent as possible. That is the goal of this particular drill. So do this as many times as you feel necessary until you have some kind of consistency going. If you find you're super inconsistent, keep doing repetitions until it feels like you're doing the same thing every single time. Once you've gotten to that point, go ahead and hit the ball normally a couple times. But again, in the back of your mind, be aware of your approach, because it is everything. Phase 1 is just as important as phase 2. And if you ever feel like you're being inconsistent, like you're not hitting the ball accurately, or you're just not getting the right ball contact, go back to this particular drill and make sure that you have consistency. Kind of recorrect yourself to get that consistent stride, to get that consistent final step, get that consistent plant spot. Because again, all of that is super important for the actual ball contact and striking of the ball to go correctly. Phase 1 is just as important as phase 2. The second drill is far more difficult than the first one that I just showed you, but it's such a good drill when it comes to, again, gauging the distance of that final step, working on your plant foot, and also being able to generate power through technique rather than through momentum. Because if you're like most people, you've probably only shot the ball with a run up, the momentum aspect of the approach. That's the reason why you run up to the ball in the first place, because that forward speed, that momentum is carried through your strike, is obviously going to generate more power, and you're going to have a more powerful shot because of it. But if you remove the momentum aspect, all you have to focus on is the length of that final step, where your plant foot is, and ultimately the technique in terms of ball contact, which these three things, if you can get those right, once you are able to add in the momentum, you'll find that your shot power is going to increase tremendously, just because your technique has gotten that much better. So what you want to do to set this up is, again, is a free kick situation. Put the ball down as if you were to take a free kick. Put your plant foot next to the ball as you want to plant it for an actual strike. Then from there, with your striking leg, take a step back, longer or shorter, depending on what you're comfortable with, the length of your normal approach final step stride. And then from there, you want to take a step forward towards the ball with your plant foot and strike through. It really is that simple, but it's extremely difficult to do, especially if you're doing this for the first time. You'll find that it's extremely difficult to generate power. You'll find that you're not stepping in the right spot. You'll find a lot of different things that just won't feel natural, it won't feel easy, and it isn't an easy drill. I'm pretty good at it at this point, but even for me, it's still something that is very, very challenging, but I continue to practice it because again, it helps me to focus on the length of that final stride, get some kind of consistency there. It allows me to focus on where I'm planting my foot very, very specifically because I'm only taking one step so I can be very accurate with where my foot ends up landing. And then 3, because the momentum aspect is taken out of it, you really have to focus on your technique. You have to focus on the ball contact. You have to focus on generating power with the rest of your body, not just your legs, in order to get that ball towards the net. Now, this is something that I would recommend practicing from the penalty spot or something like that. You technically don't even need a net. But again, you're not so much focusing on power here, you're focusing on making proper ball contact, the length of that stride, and where you're planting your foot. If you get all of that correct, you're gonna be able to get the ball off the ground and take a surprisingly hard shot without any momentum at all. All right, guys, so that is it for this particular tutorial. Probably different than most tutorials that you've watched, but the reason why I was as detailed in my explanations of everything on only one single element of striking the ball is while simple tutorials are great to give you the basics are only going to get you so far. If you're trying to really improve, if you're trying to perfect techniques, you need to know what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right, and the specifics of what you're actually doing in order to improve. And that's kind of the aim of these very detailed tutorial videos. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial video and want to see more of these on the channel, perhaps continue this on as a series, be sure to support the video with a like. Let me know your feedback down below in the comments. That would be awesome. Of course, if you guys have any questions regarding anything that I talked about in today's video, leave it down below in the comments and I will do my best to explain everything as detailed as I possibly can. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.